Sam Harris had a bit of a falling out with the IDW, the intellectual dark web, as they're called. And I mean, I guess the big issues that really broke them up were COVID related stuff. Sam Harris definitely took COVID more seriously. He's pro vaccine. And Trump related stuff. Sam Harris is, I would argue, sort of like a traditional resistance liberal Democrat type. And he really felt like the rise of Trumpism was very devastating and bad. And he was very harshly critical of Trump at a time when others in the IDW were either pro-Trump or at the very least not as hard on Trump as they were on Democrats. And so even though there was sort of overlap and agreement vis-a-vis, wokeness being bad and that being a focus of all the people in the intellectual dark web, there were too many other areas where there was disagreement. So in a sense, they kind of, a lot of the figures sort of grew apart over time, let's say. Now, Lex Friedman had on Sam Harris, and this is an interesting part because they're going to talk about Elon Musk. Now, Elon was never in the intellectual dark web, to be clear. But clearly, Sam Harris and Elon were friends, and then a similar thing happened with Elon, as Sam feels like happened with everybody else in the intellectual dark web, where, he started to become more of a shit poster. He started acting more like Trump on Twitter, saying pretty dumb things from time to time, and Sam was like really put off by it and thought he was close enough with Elon Musk to reach out to him and like try to, nicely, casually correct him on some stuff, but obviously that didn't really work out too well. So here he is. He's going to spill the tea about what was going on behind the scenes between him and Elon Musk and areas of disagreement they had. This is fun.
You have a lot of interesting ideas that you both share, concerns that you both share. Well, let me first ask, what do you admire most about Elon?
I had a lot of fun with Elon. I like Elon a lot. I mean, Elon I knew as a friend. I like a lot, and it's not going to surprise anyone. I mean, he's done and he's continuing to do amazing things, and I think he's, I think if many of his aspirations are realized, the world will be a much better place. I think it's amazing to see what he's built and what he's attempted to build and what he may yet build. And
so with Tesla, with SpaceX, with
I'm a fan of almost all of that. I mean, there are wrinkles to a lot of that, or some of that.
All humans are full of wrinkles.
There's something very Trumpian about how he's acting on Twitter. I mean, Twitter, I think he thinks Twitter is great. He bought the place because he thinks it's so great. I think Twitter's driving him crazy, right? I think he's needlessly complicating his life and harming his reputation and creating a lot of noise and harming a lot of other people. I mean, so the thing that I objected to with him on Twitter is not that he bought it and made changes to it. I mean, that was not, I remain agnostic as to whether or not he can improve the platform. It was how he was personally behaving on Twitter, not just toward me, but toward the world. I think when you forward an article about Nancy Pelosi's husband being attacked, not as he was by some lunatic, but that it's just some gay tryst gone awry, right? That's not what it seems. And you link to a website that previously claimed that Hillary Clinton was dead and that a body double was campaigning in her place. That thing was exploding in Trumpistan as a conspiracy theory, right? And it was having its effect. And it matters that he was signal boosting it in front of 130 million people. And so it is with saying that your former employee, Yoel Roth, is a pedophile, right? I mean, it's like that has real consequences. It appeared to be complete bullshit. And now this guy's getting inundated with death threats, right? And Elon, that's totally predictable, right? And he's behaving quite recklessly. And there's a long list of things like that he's done on Twitter. It's not ethical. It's not good for him. It's not good for the world. It's not serious. It's a very adolescent relationship to real problems in our society. And so my problem with how he's behaved is that he's purported to touch real issues by turns. Like, okay, do I give the satellites to Ukraine or not? Do I minimize their use of them or not? Should I publicly worry about World War III or not? Right? He's doing this shit on Twitter, right? And at the same moment, he's doing these other very impulsive, ill-considered things, and he's not showing any willingness to really clean up the mess he makes. He brings Kanye on, knowing he's an anti-Semite who's got mental health problems, and then kicks him off for a swastika, which I probably wouldn't have kicked him off for a swastika. It's like that's even like Can you really kick people off for swastikas? Is that something that you get banned for? I mean, are you a free speech absolutist if you can't let a swastika show up? I'm not even sure that's enforceable terms of service, right? There are moments to use swastikas that are not conveying hate and not raising the risk of violence.
Clip that.
Yeah. But so much of what he's doing, given that again, scale matters. He's doing this in front of 130 million people. That's very different than 1 million people. And that's very different than 100,000 people. And so when I went off the tracks with Elon, he was doing this about COVID. And again, this was a situation where I tried to privately mitigate a friend's behavior, and it didn't work out very well.
Did you try to correct him, sort of highlighting things he might be wrong on?
Yeah.
Or did you use the Lex Power Love method? I should write like a pamphlet for Sam Harris to
follow.
No,
but it was totally coming from a place of love, because I was concerned about his reputation. I was concerned about there was a twofold concern. I could see what was happening with the tweet. I mean, he had this original tweet that was, I think it was panic over COVID is dumb or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at the date on that tweet. March 6th, 2020. This is before the U.S. really got clonked over the head with COVID, and now, of course, we have over 1 million deaths. So Sam Harris, very, very COVID cautious and aware of what this thing could do, and Elon saying stuff like this.
This is in March. This is early March 2020.
Oh,
right?
Super early days.
Super early. So when nobody knew anything, but we saw what was happening in Italy, right? It was totally kicking off.
God, that was a wild time. That's when the toilet
wild.
paper.
It was totally wild. But that became the most influential tweet on Twitter for that week. I mean, it had more engagement than any other tweet, more than any crazy thing Trump was tweeting. I mean, it went off, again, it was just a nuclear bomb of information. And I could see that people were responding to it like, wait a minute, okay, here's this genius technologist who must have inside information about everything, right? Surely he knows something that is not on the surface about this pandemic. And they were reading into it a lot of information that I knew wasn't there, right? And at the time, I didn't think he had any reason to be suggesting that. I think he was just firing off a tweet, right? So I reached out to him in private, and I mean, because it was a private text conversation, I won't talk about the details, but I'm just saying that's a case, among the many cases of friends who have public platforms and who did something that I thought was dangerous and ill-considered. This was a case where I reached out in private and tried to help, genuinely help, because it was just, I thought it was harmful in every sense, because it was being misinterpreted. And it's like, okay, you can say that panic over anything is dumb, fine, but this was not how this was landing. This was like non-issue, conspiracy, there's going to be no COVID in the U.S. It's going to peter out. It's just going to become a...
He did say that. Elon Musk said, based on current trends, close to 0 cases by April or something like that. And that was an even more specifically wrong and dumb tweet than the one that was on the screen before.
I mean, that's how this was getting received. Whereas at that moment, it was absolutely obvious how big a deal this was going to be, or that it was going to, at minimum, going to be a big deal.
I don't know if it was obvious, but it was obvious that it was a significant probability that it could be a big deal. Yeah. I remember in March, it was unclear, like how big, because there were still stories of it. Like it's probably going to like the big concern, the hospitals might overfill, but it's going to die out in like 2 months or something. Yeah,
we don't know, but there was no way we weren't going to have tens of thousands of deaths at a minimum at that point, And it was totally rational to be worried about hundreds of thousands. And when Nicholas Christakis came on my podcast very early, he predicted quite confidently that we would have about 1 million people dead in the U.S. Right, and that didn't seem, it was I think appropriately hedged, but I mean, it was just like, okay, it's just gonna, you just look at we're just kind of riding this exponential, and it's going to be, it'd be very surprising not to have that order of magnitude and not something much less, and. So anyway, I mean, to close the story on Elon, I could see how this was being received, and I tried to get him to walk that back. And then we had a fairly long and detailed exchange on this issue, and that intervention didn't work, and it was not done. I was not an asshole. I was just concerned, for him, for the world, and then there are other relationships where I didn't take again, that's an example where taking the time didn't work, right? Privately. There are other relationships where I thought, okay, this is just going to be more trouble than it's worth. And I just ignored it,
Dave Rubin. He's definitely talking about Dave Rubin there.
There's a lot of that. Again, I'm not comfortable with how this is all netted out, because I don't know if And I'm not, frankly, I'm not comfortable with how much time in this conversation we've spent talking about these specific people. Like, what good is it for me to talk about Elon or Brett or any?
I think there's a lot of good because those friendships. Listen, as a fan, these are the conversations that I love as a fan, and it feels like COVID has robbed the world of these conversations because you were exchanging back and forth on Twitter. But that's not what I mean by conversations, like long form discussions, like a debate about COVID. Like a normal debate.
But there's no, Elon and I shouldn't be debating COVID.
You should be. Here's the thing with humility. Like,
so he goes on to make the argument, like engage like Rogan style, where you both say, hey, we're no experts on this particular thing, but let me give you my take, you give me your take, and let's bounce ideas back and forth off each other. Look, on Elon specifically, these aren't even my biggest issues with him. And I think on the substance of it all, I think that Harris is right that Elon really had no idea what he was talking about. It's like when he went on Twitter before the midterm elections and said it's going to be a red wave. And then, of course, it was a historic underperformance for the Republicans, nowhere near a red wave. It's like there's been a number of things where he says something definitive and then it just doesn't come to pass or he's dead wrong. Remember when he was on some talk show and he said, like, I'll put a person on Mars in 10 years. And that was like 11 or 12 years ago. And we're not like even close to being able to do like go to Mars. So, but that's not even the stuff about him. Over promises, under delivers, says things that are empirically wrong, etc. To me, the biggest issue, at least as of right now, is he came along promising to like fix Twitter and I'm going to be the free speech guy. And then now he is just as censorious, if not more censorious than the previous Twitter regime. And that's hard to do. But remember when he went on a banning spree of journalists because journalists dared to report on the feud he was having with the Elon jet account? Where, he was saying, oh, this is doxing. Whereas, legally speaking, it's not because the flight data is all public stuff. But he banned that account after saying, I will even allow that account to stay up because that's how much I believe in free speech. He changed his mind on that, banned that account. And then there were like a dozen journalists that reported on the story involving Elon and the Elon jet account. And they just got banned. He makes these really like, flippant, impulsive decisions vis-a-vis Twitter policy and just like drives it into the ground further and then promises like, no, from now on I'll have like a board review it before I do anything. And then he just doesn't do that and he ignores it. And so that's my biggest issue with him. On top of course, just the standard. There's a long track record of him as a boss being deeply against free speech and retaliating against people who don't fall in line, firing them, etc. A history of very questionable stuff vis-a-vis business fraud, where again, over-promising, under-delivering, but potentially even reaching the case of criminal fraud. I mean, I've seen that guy Thunderfoot compares him to Elizabeth Holmes' lady, the Theranos lady, and the person who did the what is it, Nikola? Because Musk is Tesla. There's one other, I think it was like a Nikola company that was all totally fraudulent. Anyway, you guys get the gist of it. Super questionable business record, massive hypocrite on the issue of free speech. I think his leadership on Twitter has been horrible to the point of being embarrassing, and political analysis that's about as salient as that of a dead raccoon. So clearly Harris had some falling out with all these people who are either in the IDW or related to the IDW, because even though they all share the concern around wokeness, he's more anti-Trump. They're a little more pro-Trump. He took COVID seriously. They don't take it nearly as seriously, and many of them were either openly anti-vax or vaccine skeptical or whatever you'd call it. And so, like, I see what Lex is saying, like, hey, you guys should like talk it out and stuff, and that'd be great. I mean, sure, right? Like, that's cool. Have podcasts and talk it out or whatever. But at the end of the day, these fences will not be mended. Is that the saying? I don't know if that's saying. But it's not going to work out in the long run because they genuinely don't like each other now. And I mean, that just is what it is. There's no way around it, right? And I think Harris has taken quite a hit in terms of like his audience size and the number of followers or whatever. But to his credit, I don't think he really cares. Because, he feels like I'm just going to say what I think is true regardless of where the chips may fall. And even if he loses 50% of his audience, he feels like it's worth it. Because he doesn't want people who are, for example, fans of Dave Rubin and fans of him, because he just totally disagrees with Dave Rubin on like almost everything now. So anyway, interesting back and forth. I could tell Sam was like trying to be kind of nice to Elon there, but it certainly also came across like he totally bodied him. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.